Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It's Julia Rose, your loving and passionate and committed host, who is just absolutely delighted to be with you here today. What I wanted to talk about today is I wasn't really sure how to phrase this actually, but how self-care is not this abstract idea. And I kind of want to do some storytelling from my own trauma healing journey here, because as any of you who've worked with me in the past know, I like to be as transparent as possible while also making it relevant to the work we're doing together. And I certainly don't have any desire to be trauma dumping or oversharing my own journey. We all have our unique trauma healing journeys, but I do like to reveal where it's relevant. So what was coming up for me as I was thinking about doing this podcast episode was really an experience I had in my early 20s. I was fortunate enough to very critical time. I was having a personal crisis, a personal breakdown. I had the privilege of being able to go to one of the top trauma treatment centers in the world. It's called the Meadows. It's in Wickenburg, Arizona. And it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I've actually had several family members go there as well. And the Meadows, they know their stuff. I ended up getting trained there once I became a clinician years later in their model because it's so powerful. And I'd actually love to do an episode about that at some point. But all of that's an aside. What I want to tell you about that experience is while I was there, I remember there was this woman, we later became friends, this woman who was there in part for childhood trauma and also in part due to like a full-on physiological breakdown based on overwork and burnout. And I remember just seeing what her body looked like. It actually didn't have to do with what she looked like, size, height, color, shape. It wasn't that at all. What I noticed about her body was I could feel the weight of what she was carrying. And I don't mean that as an allusion to her actual weight. I could feel the heaviness. I could feel the burden she was carrying. And it was the first time I hadn't hit burnout. I wasn't even a therapist at the time. This idea that overwork or burnout could have such an effect on someone was kind of it was just a conception to me at that time. And this was the first person who really I saw in living color, her embody this. It was like, yeah, I just got the feeling being around her and talking to her of her being bone tired. And I remember that because several years later, I would find myself in grad school. It was actually at the Meadows that I applied to become a therapist myself. And then I went through a very aggressive and intense grad school period. And then also, collecting my 3,000 hours. I did it in a really accelerated way because I was in my own place of workaholism. And then I got licensed. Within 2 years, I launched Trauma Camp. I then built the training course. I then launched this podcast. I also launched a membership site, meanwhile having a full practice. And I say all of this because this is a recipe for burnout and breakdown. And exactly what happened is I had a full-on physiological breakdown. I also had some personal stuff going on that really contributed to that as well. But when we are experiencing that level of depletion and we don't have the reserves to navigate life in a way that is within our resources, when we are in that particular place, the idea of self-care, nourishment, nurturing, recovery, rest, all of that moves from abstract concept or idea to vitally necessary. It's kind of like if you don't sleep for several nights, you won't be able to move forward if you don't get a night of sleep, right? Like that is setting into a level of psychological defeat that is impossible to overcome without actually getting the need of sleep met. And so after my period of burnout and breakdown, I started understanding from a personal experience how it's not just like a hot bath here and a nap here and drinking water throughout the day. I mean, all of those things are great and important and probably contribute to an overall experience of self-care in those doses. But for me, it became starting to ask the question, is the way that I am running my life right now sustainable? Can I keep doing this at the pace that I'm going, with the load that I'm carrying, with the amount of work or commitment on my plate. And most of my answers to those questions were no. They were no. They were hard no. I was forced to accept the reality of that. And it's interesting because when it was just a concept, right? Like I, like all of you, have heard and been to so many lectures and trainings on self-care and prioritizing self-care, and we put our mask on first before we can help others. But the way I was interpreting that in my own life was kind of a, yeah, I understand, but I'll just keep doing it the way I've been doing. It was one of those things that didn't fully land. That's actually one of the gifts of burnout, is it kind of forces you. And this is, again, one of the gifts of how our bodies make their demands of us, right? If we don't listen to what our physiology needs, over time, our body will essentially break down so much that we can't ignore it anymore. And we really have to do it. Hopefully we don't get to those places. Hopefully if you haven't hit burnout yourself, you can just take my word for it. But I tend to be someone who needs to learn from experience before I really like, oh, that's why all those people were saying it. And so what it meant for me was a lot of the self-care was actually not just about resting, getting enough sleep, starting to take naps throughout the day, which, by the way, I'm a big proponent of napping for adults as well as children, when and where possible and when and where needed or desired. But it wasn't just about that. It wasn't just about getting out and doing more walks, which also, that was like, walking is a big part, not just of my physiological well-being, but actually it's very connected to my spirituality. I'm often in prayer or feeling in communion with what I believe in spiritually, and a lot of that is experienced through nature and animals and the live world around me, like literally allowing Mother Nature to regulate my nervous system. So that's important. But I think the biggest part of it for me was starting to say no in my relationships, saying no to family members, saying no to commitments, saying no to things that when I checked in with myself, I understood I didn't actually have the reserves for. And one of the things that made that so difficult for me was because I had that codependent edge of not wanting people to be disappointed in me, right? And again, I would love to, I mentioned this in my last episode, but I would love to talk to you about the model of child immaturity and codependence from the Meadows, because codependence is directly related to interpersonal trauma. But it was really hard for me to say no to people. And I imagine a lot of you relate to this. As a woman, have also been conditioned so deeply to be other-oriented and to prioritize other people and to have my sense of purpose and value be connected to being of service to others. That is so deeply ingrained in me. I mean, here I am as a therapist, right? I do this with my work, but now I'm also working with educators who also are fundamentally other-oriented in their work. And so this stuff gets so deeply implanted and reinforced in us. And so it felt really like challenging, difficult, like I was doing something wrong to start saying no. Both I can't do that, but also learning how to say no, I just don't want to do that, and really giving myself the permission and space to put myself as the top priority. And we're really taught not to do this from a very early age. And this isn't just women, this is children, this is men, this is non-binary. This is something we are taught very early on in different ways, depending on our family constellation, where we come from, our cultural reinforcement, all this stuff. But we are taught very early on to be other-oriented. And so it can literally feel wrong, like you're doing something morally wrong. And the reason I wanted to specifically name this is because that has to be a part of practicing self-care too, is to actually be caring about what it is you want for yourself and what it is you have the capacity for in your own life. The most resourced, and I don't mean financially, actually, I have plenty of people in my life who their inner resourcing is not connected to financial resourcing much at all, but their inner resourcing has everything to do with them having the clear understanding that I am of no service to the world if I have not taken care of myself first. Actually, I would love you to say that with me. I am of no service to the world if I have not taken care of myself first. And for those of you who are like, hear that and are like, yes, I needed to hear that today, Julia. Thank you. Amen. I support that. Wonderful. Others of you might also hear that little edge of, well, that's still sort of other oriented, right? I have to take care of myself first so that I can be of service to the world. And so I want to go a little deeper with my next offering, which is we were not brought here to earth to only be of service to other people. We were brought here to also experience other people's service to us, and this beautiful, harmonious way that we get to do that with each other. I name it as a both and. Part of being a human is being of service to others, and part of it is experiencing the service of others. Part of it is experiencing our service to ourselves, right? It's this multifaceted, beautiful, it reminds me of the Triskel knot in Celtic imagery, I guess is what you could say. Like they all work into each other. They all flow into each other. But so often we can just get so stuck in being only of service to other people. And what I'd love to invite here is the practice of service to self and then the allowing of others to be of service to you. Now, if you're stuck in one of these other places of I'm only of service to myself, or I'm only receiving the service of other people, then I might, offer a different guidance in a different direction. But for those of you who are oriented towards being of service to others constantly, chronically, that makes you vulnerable for burnout because you're just giving out more than you're bringing in. And so I really want to encourage you to learn how to say no as a way of showing up for yourself. So the questions for all of you are, where am I saying yes in my life where I really need to say no? Where am I saying no in my life where I really need to be saying yes, perhaps to myself? What comes up for me at the idea of prioritizing myself, period, full stop? What comes up for me around that idea? What fears do I have? What judgments emerge? What conditioning patterns does that tap into? Does that hit? And also, this is a really good one though. How does my body respond to this question? What would it feel like if it were okay to prioritize myself and give myself the care, the connection, the nourishment, the rest, the downtime that I needed? What if that were okay? And just notice how your body responds. Oftentimes I find that self-care is so much about permission, right? Am I allowed to do this? Oftentimes we need that permission from other people before we can give it to ourselves and like really own that permission. And so for all of you, if you find that you are needing that permission, you got it. Here it is. You have that permission to prioritize yourself and take care of yourself. So that's it for our episode today. I'm so glad you all joined me, and I'd love to know how you're taking care of yourselves today. Just today, small or big. Doesn't have to be a massage at a spa, doesn't have to be a facial, although please, if you have any good recommendations, I love that stuff. So send it my way. But are you not picking up a phone call because you need to kind of protect your reserves? Are you closing your laptop while you're having lunch and just allowing yourself to be in a state of nourishing your body and taking a beat? Are you asking a friend to talk because you feel kind of dysregulated and need some support? All of these are little doses of self-care and prioritizing yourself that when we get good at this, life becomes so much more tolerable, sustainable, enjoyable, functional. Yeah. So thanks for joining me for this episode today, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.